In the Aorto Valley of northwestern Italy sits the castle of Issogne, home to Giorgio di Scianna, the governor of the region from 1464 to 1509. Upon taking this position, he inherited the medieval castle and transformed it into a modern stately mansion. This included the installation of a series of frescoes depicting various aspects of life in the Renaissance, Beyoncé's hit 2022 album. I mean the Italian Renaissance, specifically the early Renaissance. One of these frescoes affords a glimpse into the storefront or bodega of an apothecary. The fresco itself highlights a plethora of important ideas relating to the role of the apothecary in Italian culture and the practice of medicine during the Renaissance. First, the shop is selling a wide variety of merchandise, not all obviously related to medicine. The items up top and on the table appear to be cakes or other foods, maybe dried fruit or sweets. Hanging from the ceiling are waxes, candles, and even toys. These items were as important to the apothecary as the medicinals themselves. It's important to note that apothecaries and physicians worked under Galenic principles, chiefly humoral theories, so food and medicine were many times one and the same. In fact, the words confectionerus, speziale, or spicer, and aromateria are relatively interchangeable when discussing the Italian apothecary. The other assortment of items were mostly supplemental income. Many times, selling medicines was not enough to support business, and so these shops sold a variety of items to make up for this. Interestingly, a common product for these shops was dyes and pigments for artists, since many medicinal ingredients crossed over, like lead and saffron. Next, the various jars and jugs on the shelves held medicinal ingredients and prefabricated medicines and medicinal waters. In this part of the shop, however, the storefront, these jugs were more for display rather than to house product. The most interesting part of this artwork is the people depicted in it. The different employees are shown ranked based on their height in the fresco. Highest on the far left is the pharmacist and most likely the owner of the shop. Not only is he identifiable by his position above everyone else, but his outfit is commonly seen across depictions of physicians in the 15th and 16th centuries. Below him is the assistant, who is measuring out ingredients for sale and handling transactions. His age, compared to the physician, and his expensive-looking outfit makes it reasonable to assume that he is likely educated and part of an elite class, but inferior to the physician. A poor worker sits on the ground in ripped clothing and one shoe, doing the physical and unskilled labor required for the shop. The shop's patron is a wealthy woman who appears, most interestingly, alone and acting as a patron herself. This marks a very important role in the culture of the apothecary and the wider culture of the Italian Renaissance. Italian apothecaries can be split into two groups. The first are apothecaries owned by wealthy individuals, running their shops for profit and status. The second are apothecaries owned and run for charitable cause, typically by churches and frequently convents. Nun-run apothecaries are one of the few examples of female-run business during the time. The introduction of nun-run apothecaries was significant as it gave nuns new economic public roles. Religious women were some of the principal agents of health, as they frequently acted as nurses taking care of the sick, running clinics, and running apothecaries. At this time across Europe, there was a growing interest in medicine, fueled by pandemic, increased circulation of literature, and improved trade with other parts of the world such as the Middle East and Asia, which brought in rare spices and minerals. Nuns capitalized off this growing interest in medicine to help fund struggling convents and found lots of success across Italy. As part of their work, they distributed drugs to the poor as a charitable act, setting them apart from traditional apothecaries and their purely capitalistic incentives. Receipts from these convent pharmacies showed that they were a hub for local women to gather and functioned as a site of female socialization and community that was not necessarily offered elsewhere. Commerce didn't really follow a strict gender division, but a large patronage of women suggests that these convents were special. Nuns also had stable trust with local communities that lay apothecary shops didn't have. Because convents had been central to healthcare for a while, their products were less likely to be questioned and drew in higher profile clients. For example, one of the chief patrons at Sister Ursula's pharmacy in Florence was Maria Salviati Medici. Nuns' central role in Italian pharmacology lends itself to the fact that religious women were essential in the distribution of medical knowledge across space and time. While commercial shops were run by just a few people, the nun-run apothecary had a full convent of learned women to spread and grow medical knowledge. Commercial apothecaries were a completely different thing. Owning a collection of rare objects that you show off is one thing, but to be able to sell a stock of them is a completely different level of wealth. The economic and social incentives of owning an apothecary shop created a competitive culture within these spaces. The goal was to outcompete your competitors, and so you had to set yourself apart. One of the most famous ways they did this was by creating highly decadent shops. Owners spent tons of money on beautifully decorated jars, painted and engraved with labels, deities, and other decorations. Having a collection of custom jars was normal for an apothecary, and how lavish the jar collection was set the level of prestige a shop had. The jars also allowed the shop owner to show off their impressive collection, and boasting a luxurious line of products could help the popularity of your shop. The interior of a shop was also important, as they were central locations for social interaction. A mixture of clientele from different walks of life offered a rare opportunity to spread rumor, politics, or even heresy. Slander was also a common tactic in the industry. It was more common in commercial shops, but the charitable apothecaries certainly were victims as well. Take, for example, the story of Ulisse Aldrovandi and the local apothecaries in Bologna. In 1570, Aldrovandi prepared a sample of his theriac using rare ingredients. The locals were not happy, worrying that this luxurious theriac would threaten their business. They tried to replicate it, to which Aldrovandi tried to publicly defame them, claiming, "The majority of apothecaries who ought to be knowledgeable in this material are, nonetheless, completely ignorant and often barely know how to read. From time to time, they mistake one simple for its opposite with poisonous qualities, as May can tell you." Returning to Issogne, it's easy to see why Siena included the scene of the apothecary in its depictions of daily life. These shops acted as a center for Italian consumerism, class, and drama, and their activities illuminate how medical knowledge spread and the people that made it happen.